Liam Tunney, you're very welcome to the BelTel. Liam, just to establish what this inquest is before we get into the details of the evidence, because we have heard evidence today, this inquest has been ongoing since Monday. This, according to the coroner, is simply a way of establishing facts about the death of Noah Donohoe. It's important, of course, that the public understand that. It is, however, slightly unusual in terms of an inquest in that there are barristers, there are many lawyers, the coroner himself is represented by a barrister, and there is, of course, a jury. It's interesting that Mr. Justice Rooney has told the jury that they must deliver their findings on the evidence they hear and see in court, and they must ignore any publicity around the proceedings, and that this inquest would likely last until March. There are many warnings over how this is covered. Now, we spent the first few days choosing that jury. They were finalised this morning, and then we heard evidence. What happened in court today?
Well, in court today, initially we had the end of the jury selection process, which, as you say, took a number of days. They had to whittle that number down to choose 11 jurors and then 4 reserved candidates, I suppose, in case something went wrong. So the jury was brought in. We were called into court. The jury was brought in from the jury room that they would stay in. They were then brought into their seats. They were sworn in by the judge. At that point, then they left. They had to go make a phone call to tell, I suppose, their families and whoever they need to tell that they've been selected for jury duty. If at that point anything had been unusual, that's when the reserves would have come in. But in this case, that didn't happen. The jurors then came back into the room. We had a brief break, and then we had our opening statements. On, I suppose, what would have been the 4th day of the inquest. That opening statement was delivered by counsel for the coroner, Peter Call, KC. He relayed the outline of the facts around the case and what's currently known about it. And at that point, then once he concluded his opening statements, we heard evidence, and the first evidence was the recording of the 999 call made by Noah's mum, Fiona, on the evening that he first went missing. So that was the first piece of evidence that we heard this morning.
And you heard that, the physical recording of that as it was made. How long was that call?
That call, it lasted just under 26 minutes. And it initially just began. I mean, you heard it from start to finish, where Miss Donohoe made it very clear that her son was missing. She went through his kind of movements over the last few days before that. There were a number of revelations within that call. She said that the disappearance of Noah was totally out of character for him. She said that he had been crying in his bedroom on that day before he left home. She said she had gone in and found him crying in his room, and he had initially said, "I wasn't crying, I was laughing." And then he announced he was going out to go meet his friends to go and, I suppose, go on a trip to Cave Hill. In the call, she's emotional, understandably. You can hear her saying, "He's never out this late, it's so unlike him. He took a backpack. My instinct is telling me it's not right." And then she goes on to say he's been overthinking things. He's really not been himself. So within that call, you kind of got an idea of, I suppose, the panic that her son had been missing, that he'd gone out that day. She said it was totally out of character for him and that he was missing. She also told police that he had been overprotective earlier on that day.
Of her?
Of her, yes. She said he'd been quite, as she put it, quite huggy. And she mentioned that he had been going around the house doing things for her. And she said that wasn't completely unusual. That he was a kind soul, as she put it, and he would do that kind of thing. But she felt that maybe he was doing it a little more than usual that day, and that's what made it slightly unusual at that point. She also told police that she had concerns over the teenager's mental health, and obviously that he had been crying in his room. She said over the last week he hadn't been himself at all, and she was concerned for his safety.
She said, I mean, I'm just looking at your report here, and he said he'd been getting very philosophical. He's a deep wee thinker. He's been so deep in thought about life. Just the way he's going on today, he's really overprotective. He keep giving me big hugs, and that was all. It's quite an in-depth, I suppose, in terms of phone call to the police. But I mean, I take it in terms of the basic content of that call, that the call handler was trying to elicit as much information as possible in order to begin a search for Noah.
Mm-hmm. And you can hear that back and forth on the call, where the call handler is asking Miss Donohoe to describe her son and give details about what he was wearing, what he might have been carrying that day. And
she also mentioned that he had taken his laptop, that he was never would go out late. It was very unlike him, and she was surprised by the fact that he would take his laptop with him.
Yeah, she said that was unusual. I suppose what he said, he was going to Cave Hill, which I suppose for people who aren't aware is a mountain in North Belfast. And I suppose she maybe felt it was unusual that he would have brought a laptop and a couple of other items, including the book we mentioned. She said it was unusual for him to go out with a laptop, and it's not something he would usually brought with him.
And she mentioned that she herself had ordered the book 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson for him, that he hadn't taken it out of his hand, that he had been obsessed with reading the book. And she did say, and I'm going to quote exactly what she said, "I have extreme concerns about his mental health. It's just this week, he's acting so out of character. He's been up and down. His moods have been really out of character. He's usually easygoing." So that was what was said in the call to police, the emergency call to police, in terms of where he was. That then continued with her evidence, an up-to-date version of her evidence, I suppose, if we could put it like that. But it was a pre-record, and she was present to listen to that in the court. So she didn't give it live, but it was it video evidence?
It was video evidence. It was recorded on the 7th of January. It was recorded, in agreement with all parties in the case that this would be pre-recorded and would be played in court on the day of the inquest. So again, we heard her speak at length about Noah. This evidence was 96 minutes in total, so it was split into two sessions of around kind of 45 minutes ish. During that video, she talked about the magical bond that the pair shared. She spoke about Noah's early days in Strabane, where they lived until he was 5, and the kind of bond they had forged, I suppose, as she put it. They were a single parent family, and that had forged a tight bond between the two. They said they were a team in every aspect of her life, and she said he was an upbeat, positive, beautiful young gentleman who embraced anything that came his way with bright enthusiasm. She said that Noah inspired her with the mentality that he had, and that mentality she described as that everything can be overcome in some way.
She also said, understand that he had wanted to study. He had a dream of studying in Trinity College in Dublin, and that he also was looking forward to having his braces removed at his next orthodontist appointment. And she talked about his beautiful smile. So very normal descriptions of the relationship. And then she did say that her gut told her that she should be worried when he didn't return home.
She said her gut told her she should be worried that something wasn't right when he didn't return home on that day in June 2020. She had said they'd agreed a time of 8 o'clock for him to be home after leaving to go and see his friends. She said she first became afraid then when he didn't answer his mobile when she tried to contact him, and that's when she said her instinct told her something wasn't right. She then had a friend come down and drive her to Cave Hill, but they weren't able to find her son. She described looking up and down the streets as she was driving up the road in case he was, walking down the street and they might miss him. She then said she called 999 and reported him to police at around 9:45 p.m. She said she was concerned that he had been a bit down and more emotional than usual in the week before his disappearance, but she said she was not concerned before he disappeared and had no reason to worry in her witness statement.
She said that the day before he went missing, Noah had spent the day with a friend, and that the news that he had left the house that night came as a surprise. Now, we're not going to discuss any prior knowledge or story we have. We can only reference that, but what she's referring to is the fact that he had left the house, and that she was unaware of that.
Yeah, she mentions that in her statement, the CCTV footage that was shown to her 2 years after the incident. So that's something that she did mention in her statement, further on in her statement. But at this point, she said that she believed Noah had gone to bed. That footage showed him leaving the house in the early hours of the 21st. So I suppose coming into between the 20th when he met his friend and the 21st when he went missing. She said that she had a friend over and they had stayed until 11 o'clock. She had a few glasses of wine and went to bed shortly afterwards, and she believed he had gone to his bed, and she didn't think he would be up until the small hours. And that's in reference to that CCTV footage. The news that he had gone out that night, she said, took her completely by surprise at that point.
This is, I mean, she said this is quite a lengthy witness statement in terms of evidence, and there's quite a bit in it. So we do have quite a bit to get through, but it is important, I think, that we do touch on everything she did say, because we want the listener to have as complete a report as possible on this inquest. She did say that the COVID lockdown, had impacted on Noah.
She told the court she had been concerned about the impact. She said the weekend before Noah had gone missing, he'd made plans with two friends to go to Cahill, but they hadn't gone. She said she contacted his school about any potential activities for pupils that were taking place during lockdown, as opposed to maybe ease that isolation.
She described then the period of time between Noah going missing and his remains being discovered. She described the distress involved there.
She described it in detail. I mean, that was a period of about 6 days. You're talking almost a week there. She said she couldn't overstate just how terrible that period had been, between him going missing and his body being recovered on June 27th. She described herself as being in a state of constant fear and anxiety. She feared the worst. She didn't know what had happened. Her sleep suffered. She was beyond distressed and emotionally vulnerable. As you say, she described it as a living nightmare.
In the course of this evidence today, she did question if her son's life could have been saved if, in her words, the right steps had have been taken by the police.
Yeah, at one point during her statement, she was critical of the police and a theory they had during the time of his disappearance that he had suffered a concussion following a head injury. She said in her witness statement, and I understand the evidence does not support this theory. She said she was concerned police were not searching homes in the area where he was last seen. That's the Northwood Road area. She said she had so many concerns about what occurred during that period, including whether all necessary steps were taken promptly, whether lines of inquiry were closed off, and worst of all, whether Noah could have been saved if the right steps had been taken.
I do note that she said she's hoping answers will be provided over his death in this inquest, and that she had no explanation for why CCTV footage captured Noah naked, cycling without his bag. And she also said in the course of this evidence that she never had any suspicion that Noah had taken drugs.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something that she touched on at length. I mean, her concern, she was tormented, was the word she used, that her son's legacy would be tainted by this rumours and the suspicion that he had taken drugs was her word. She said she never had any suspicion that her son had taken drugs, and she said she hopes answers will be provided as part of this inquest. She also said she had no explanation for why that CCTV footage captured him naked and without his bag. And what she said was she's holding out hope that the inquest can provide her answers to what happened to Noah, including what caused him to travel to the Northwood Road and to behave as he did. She said again, this was entirely out of character for Noah. She
said that she is horrified that her son was able to access the storm drain in North Belfast where his body was ultimately found. She said she'd so many questions about all aspects of the investigation into Noah's death by the police, and said, overall, I feel that a blind eye has been turned. The evidence conflicted with the police theory about what happened to Noah. Noah deserved much better. And, she returned then to the subject of Noah himself and his personality.
She did, and you could see that the whole way through her evidence, and including both in the 999 call itself and the witness statement that she gave. She said he was a beautiful, happy and much loved soul. And again, she said she was tormented by the thought that his legacy could be tainted in any way by rumour and suspicion about who he was or what had happened to him. She said he was genuine, fun-loving, kind and inquisitive. He had a joy for life. He had a bright future ahead of him, and that's what she said should be at the heart of this inquest into his death.
And Fiona Donohoe said that she has a duty to Noah to find out what happened to him and how he died, and how the coroner understands whether his death could have been prevented. Liam Tunney, thank you very much.